Welcome to the Old Ways for the New Age podcast, where we weave the threads of traditional living into the tapestry of modern day life. I'm your host, Hannah, and I'm a naturopath, herbalist, and passionate plant lover here to discuss topics such as daily ritual, intentional living, witchcraft, herbal astrology, plus sharing interviews with inspiring guests, and so much more. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a podcast review if you enjoy my content. I wish to honour and express my deepest gratitude to the traditional custodians of the unceded land on which I live and record, the Wandjirra people. I want to acknowledge their elders, past, present and emerging, and their continued connection to the land, sea and community. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hey everyone, and welcome to part one of a 3-part conversation that I had recently with incredibly talented herbalist and teacher Meghan Rhodes from the Heritage School of Herbal Medicine. Meghan and I get chatting and have such a great time talking with each other, and in this 3-part series, we're having a conversation where we lay the foundations for Meghan's 8-season system, where we explore the basics of the Wheel of the Year and the 3 Ayurvedic Doshas, and how Meghan weaves these frameworks together to help us build a more holistic and seasonal herbal practice. Now, this conversation is fantastic for beginners. Meghan has a beautiful way of teaching that makes things really easily digestible and fun to learn about. But also, this is equally as valuable for those of you who maybe are already practitioners, already have a herbal practice, or have been studying for years, because if you don't already work with a framework like this, then you will learn something. And I even walked away definitely having learned quite a few things, which is really fun for me. So grab a cup of tea and get cozy. And I also just wanted to quickly remind you, you'll hear about this in part 3, but Meghan already has applications open for her intensive herbalism course called Awaken Herbal Wisdom for her 2026 cohorts. So if you're in the UK or you're planning to go to the UK for an extended stay, you can definitely explore that, and I'll put all of the details in the show notes. What I love about Awaken Herbal Wisdom is it's a fusion of in-person and online, and that's the way that herbal medicine always was learned, was being able to apprentice under somebody, getting to walk with them through their daily life and see how they work with the plants in real time. I don't think that an online course or even a university degree ever really prepares you in a way that learning in this hands-on manner can. So I do highly encourage you, even if you're not local to Meghan and it can't be Meghan's course, to find yourself somebody to apprentice with, somebody who is walking the plant path and willing to take you under their wing and show you how to work with the plants in this real tangible way. So if you're interested in that with Meghan's course, I'll pop again the details in the show notes, but otherwise just settle in and enjoy this episode. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Old Ways for the New Age podcast. My name is Hannah, I am your host, and today we have a very exciting returning guest chatting with us. So that's always such an honor that they liked us enough to come back. I'd love to give a huge warm welcome back to passionate herbalist and educator Meghan Rhodes. Meghan is a qualified herbalist and the founder and director of what used to be Rhodes Roots and Remedies School of Herbal Medicine and is now the Heritage School of Herbal Medicine, where she guides students on a unique sense-based herbalism course and journey, Awaken Herbal Wisdom, for up to 3 turnings of the wheel. So thank you so much for coming back, Meghan. It's lovely to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's great to chat again.
I know, and we got to do it so soon, really, after the last one. It's just like, I was so thrilled when you messaged me, and you have some amazing ideas, which we're going to touch today. So I will just, for anyone listening, we are going to be covering the 8 Sabbats in the Wheel of the Year, the 3 Ayurvedic Doshas, and how you can actually blend these 2 traditions to create a deeply seasonal, unique, and intimate herbal practice. So, Meghan, I know that we kind of covered your story on our first episode together, which for those of you who want to go check that out now, it's the Sensory Herbalism and Exploring Herbal Taste episode. But for those of you who haven't listened to it, could you give us a little rundown, just a little brief cover of kind of who you are and how you got to where you are, you know, as a herbalist and running a school?
Sure. So I'm Meghan Rhodes, and as you said, I'm the founder and director of Heritage School of Herbal Medicine. formerly Rhodes Roots and Remedies School of Herbal Medicine, which is obviously a mouthful. So we updated the brand. But Rhodes is our family name, so that's why it was in there. And you can't tell by my accent, but I'm based in East Yorkshire in the UK, although originally from Florida. So I'm quite familiar with variants in seasons based on location.
Yes.
So a lot colder here than what I was used to growing up, but it's been so long now, I've forgotten what it feels like to feel that hot, I think. I think I'd melt now. And yes, so I trained and qualified as a clinical herbal medicine practitioner, and had a private practice for a while, but was offering workshops on the side. And every time we did the workshops, everybody said, "Can we do more? Can we do more?" And I was like, "I want to do more too." So that's just evolved into a 3-year course for lay people who really want to learn how to practice herbal medicine for themselves, their family, their friends, maybe their, close community, really effectively and safely and confidently, but who know, okay, I don't want to do 500 clinic hours and open up a private practice and that sort of thing. So I really believe that that level of personal power in the home is what can cause a shift in some of the things in society that maybe aren't working for us or keeping us healthy or supporting us in being healthy. So one little ripple at a time. And I grew up in a fairly standard kind of American home of mixed, hyper processed food and home cooked stuff and loads of things that we didn't know. But then my mum got on a bit of a health food journey, and we went to the health food store, as it was called. And she and I just sort of learned together as we went. We'd trade information. Oh, swap out your cookware for this and don't put that on your body. But it wasn't until my 20s, when the gut issues that I had kind of always had, I realized, oh, that's maybe not how it's supposed to be. And started educating myself about that. And that's when I found that what I was looking for and what we'd been kind of dabbling with very lightly as a family was herbal medicine. And then it was like champagne inside moment. And that's when I went on that qualification course, and I was working in corporate tech at the time. So I used up all of my annual leave allowance to go on all my trainings. Where are you going for holiday? And then once I qualified, then I was able to leave and never look back.
Yeah, I think herbalism's definitely like that. Once you get the bug, you're in for life, right? I always say that to people, you'll never turn back. I think once that world opens up in front of you and you realize, all of these things that we didn't know, and start to reform that connection with nature, it really is like a life-altering path you step onto. Well,
It's
thank you
like the
for sharing
Matrix,
that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And something I loved diving into last time that we spoke was your passion for following the wheel of the year, which I didn't know about you at the time, and how you actually weave that into the way that you're teaching people herbalism. And I'd love to know kind of how that came about, what first got you into the wheel of the year, interested in it, came to know what it was, and if you could kind of briefly talk us through the 8 seasons or Sabbats, however you refer to them.
Yes. So, gosh, when I first came across them, I can't quite remember. I've had quite an interesting journey, I think, across various. When I was living in London, I did a bit of time studying at the College of Psychic Studies, which was fascinating and amazing. Old Victorian era school, studying all kinds of things. And that obviously piqued my interest in all sorts of, interesting stuff. And I think I probably came across the Wheel of the Year then, but wasn't looking. I was thinking of it as sort of, this is very much related to a faith practice, which I wasn't really looking for at the time. And it wasn't until I moved to the countryside in Yorkshire, and we've got a small holding, or at least we attempt a small holding. So some years are more robust in our attempts than others, just because of how life is going. And all of the things about tuning into the seasons really clicked because we had to. We had to pay attention. It mattered if there had been rain or not. It mattered when, you sort of looking at this paradigm of the wheel of the year and it says first harvest, because that is when you're harvesting, and you can't ignore it because in our village the tractors are going up and down and up and down, and they're literally making hay while the sun shines. And as I taught herbal medicine, with very much an overlap between Western practice and Ayurvedic energetics. And within Ayurveda, the energetic shift across the seasons in a particular way. And I was looking at this shift in this cycle and looking at the cycle of the wheel of the year, which I had started paying more attention to just from a land-based kind of small holding perspective. And I realized that if you overlay the two of them, then actually the dynamics lined up, and that, with a bit of kind of stretch and flex sort of and rotate and shift depending on where in the world you are. And that it was a way to look at things in a more detailed way, to pay attention to the nuances more than just spring, summer, autumn, winter. And because on a personal note, we go with sort of Steiner Waldorf education, even though they've got a slightly different paradigm when it's, Michaelmas or Candlemas or whoever miss, type of stuff. But it actually aligns quite closely, not exactly, but it kind of lines up to that as well. And of course, any of your listeners who are, crunchy, Steinery, Waldorfy type mums like us will know that, but there are crafts now and there's seasonal decorations I could do. And the whole color scheme of the felt in my house that's covering everything obviously changes. So doing a lot of that and seeing the overlap between the two. And I realized that it's such a nice way to observe the nuance and find areas in your life for that kind of, roughly 6 to 8 weeks per, 8-wheel chunk that focus you on, is there friction in my life? Where can I find more flow? Where can I create rhythm, especially with little ones? We're like, rhythm, rhythm, rhythm,
Yeah.
hold fast to, your anchor of rhythm. And looking at those opportunities to sync our rhythms with the rhythms of the rest of nature, because we are also nature. We can't get away from that, even though we're kind of inside four walls. So aligning that creates more of that flow and almost new traditions in how you are living your life for each of these chunks of the wheel that give you something to look forward to and something to flow with. Okay, this time of the year, dinner versus the clock ends up being a bit earlier because it's darker now and that works for us. Or this time of the year, we should, so you can see things shifting. And of course, you can then overlay which herbs you're working with, what are the energetics, so that you're always priming yourself for as much balance as we can possibly inject in our lives, despite, everything constantly moving anyway. And, health and feeling great throughout the wheel of the year. That cold season doesn't have to be an inevitability. And then, in home life, more crafts.
Yeah, always craft. I'm
Always crafts.
definitely so itching to go and place another felt order.
I'm going tonight. Yeah.
It's so fun. Definitely the handcrafts have got me. They've got me. And so the 8 seasons, do you refer to them as seasons or Sabbats in your practice?
I refer to them as seasons because and obviously, everybody's got their own way of doing things. In my mind, Sabbat is kind of has a more of a spiritual connotation. Whereas for me, I focus more on this season and enjoying the kind of the nature aspect of it, and then what we get to embody.
And like we talked, I believe last time about, and I harp on about it constantly, but an observational practice, and that very much ties in with the Wheel of the Year as well. Like having that
Mm,
observational practice, like that's really the point, being in tune with what's actually happening outside of our windows, outside of our
mm-hmm,
houses, that we are actually so intricately connected with, but, a lot of us have forgotten that. And modern
mm-hmm,
culture does not appreciate that or honor that. And I think that's obviously by design because it's
mm-hmm.
disconnection. It's easy to control people when they're
And
disconnected.
dysregulation, and then throwing off
Mm-hmm.
people's, bodily functions and immune systems and health, and then people are sick, and then that makes a lot of money, and it creates disempowered people, and yes, the whole spiral.
There
Which
is
is a
such a
very
spiral,
large
and
thread in our school that we talk about.
but that's what I love about the way that you teach is, you're not afraid to shy away from topics like this. And I think a lot of our listeners really appreciate that perspective and learning from someone who has the same ideals. So I think that is important to mention that Meghan is very passionate about this. And so if that's the kind of approach you have to life and that's kind of the way that you're viewing I guess, the dominant overculture, then it's definitely
Mm,
a good school for you.
mm,
So I'd love to actually cover the 8 seasons and what those are. So
mm.
would you be able to tell us what those seasons are if people were to look it up online?
Sure. So the 8 seasons are, we've got the spring equinox, which I've got dates, but it's going to vary if you're in Australia. Apologies,
Mm-hmm.
but I know you're all used to it. So the
Let's just
spring,
say if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, flip it. The
flip it.
dates, just
Yeah.
flip the dates. Yeah.
Yeah. So spring equinox, which is around the 20th ish of March. Sometimes it's called Ostara, quite commonly, and that is, the days and the nights are of equal length, and we're coming into spring. That is usually kind of similar time to Easter, which we see similarities between the word Ostara and Easter, but again, patriarchal rabbit hole that we all know is there. So we're just already in that rabbit hole and having a party there constantly. Um, Next up is Beltane, and that's May Day or the 1st of May. So that's your classic like fertility symbols and maypoles and flower crowns, although flowers are not out where I am on May Day, and it's usually freezing. So that's spring turning to summer in my mind. Then you've
Yeah.
got your summer solstice, roughly the 20th ish of June, sometimes called Letha, and that's summer, proper summer, which I'm sure, depending on where you are in Australia, and certainly, if anybody who happens to be listening from my home state of Florida, that's kind of most of the year,
Mm-hmm.
with the rest being little blips. Then there is what I like to call the first harvest or the grain harvest, because that feels quite kind of tangible for my life. It's also usually referred to as Lamas or Lunasa, which links into sort of like bread related gods and goddesses, which makes sense because it's the grain harvest. That's the bit where all the tractors are going crazy in my village. And that's the top of August. That's summer turning to autumn. Then there's the autumn equinox, also called Mabon or Mabon. I'm never quite sure how it's pronounced. Or you can call it the fruit harvest. So grain harvest and then fruit harvest. That's around the 20th ish of September. Again, days and the nights are equal length. Then we've got Samhain, many of our favorite. Halloween, 31st of October. Autumn turning to winter. Winter solstice, roughly 21st-ish of December. Winter solstice. That's Yule, and that's the longest night. That's properly winter. We are in it. It is dark. It is cold. And then
Mm-hmm.
Imbolc, or Candlemas, top of February, winter turning to spring. So you've got kind of the season as its quintessential, manifestation of the season. And then you've got that transition bit from one to the other, which is the bit I think that we kind of miss out on when we just work with the 4 seasons. And in
Mm-hmm.
Ayurveda, we say that disease begins at the juncture of the seasons. So those transition bits are really important to pay attention to from a kind of what's going on in your life, balance, herbs, food, all of that, so that we're
Mm-hmm.
not carrying excess from one season into the next and letting it overflow, and then that manifesting as disease.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And again, for Southern Hemisphere, you just flip it. I would like to inject a little resource here. There's a book I always talk about for the Southern Hemisphere folk, which is Dancing the Sacred Wheel by Frances Billinghurst. And that is awesome because it kind of is one of the few resources that we have that talks
Mm.
about what it looks like for Southern Hemisphere people. And then also, she does talk a lot. She talks about like native animals and their cycles, and she talks about also just incorporating, because as you said, sometimes where you are is not, or even in Florida, it's not reflecting, I guess, like the technical distance between. We need to also
Mm.
kind of pay attention to what our actual local environment is doing, because sometimes it's not exactly the same as what it looks like on the wheel.
Yeah.
But that's for those people who want to get the Southern Hemisphere dates. That's a really good one. And there's also a website called Spheres of Light, and they always do all the Southern Hemisphere Sabbats with the what we call the traditional dates, and then the actual dates based on the cycles in the sky. And they do that
Mm.
every single year, so you can find that as well for Southern Hemisphere people.
Mm.
Um, but I'm glad that you brought up how there's a difference between the four seasons that we're kind of taught in school that everybody knows, and then the 8 season model. So what is different about it, other than obviously there's more of them, and how does this facilitate, I guess, a deeper connection with nature for those who are looking for that?
Mm. Yeah. So when we think of, you know, taught in school, spring, summer, autumn, winter, you've got this kind of usually this stereotype in your head of, spring is lambs in the field, and little baby chicks. It's usually quite Eastery type of, iconography. And it's getting warm, but it might be rainy, and flowers are blooming, sort of thing. Um, so if we take the spring, for example, in Yorkshire, where I am, spring is pretty much freezing. It's still cold. Like snowdrops come out and there's a bit of hope, but it's still gray and freezing. And the lambs are being born, but they are cold. And um it's not quite that stereotype. Or summer, when you think, okay, summer, glorious, beach, hot, roasting, yeah. Where I live, we might get 2 weeks of that if we're lucky. Although I hardcore manifested sunshine in the UK this year, so you're welcome to everybody here, because it's been sunny and glorious. Even if it's not warm, we've still had the sun at least, because last year was just unacceptable. And you've got that quintessential period, but you've also got when, as I said, here the tractors are going back and forth. So the landscape totally changes from green and lush and maybe, where you are a bit burnt, which is sometimes very burnt now, depending on where you are in the world and all the imbalances that are happening. But then the landscape changes. Come August here, it's all of the fields, and you can see all that's like Van Gogh paintings everywhere. All the bales of hay and silage are all rolled up, and the landscape changes. But we miss that if we're not thinking, if we've not got in our consciousness, actually this is a different season. Something
Mhm.
is different here. It's changing, it's transitioning. So when you're aware of 8 seasons rather than 4, your mind knows that you're looking out for more. You're looking for changes, you're looking for differences, and then you can feel them more. When you notice them, you can incorporate them more into what you're doing, what you're eating, how your daily rhythm is going. We also look at, not to throw another spanner in the works, but within Ayurveda, you've got a seasonal rhythm. Another reason to cross it over with the wheel of the year is because we don't all live in India, where the seasonal rhythm, their seasonal rhythm is from. So it doesn't necessarily, match up timing wise either. But then there's a daily rhythm. The time difference in the UK, for example, between the winter solstice And the summer solstice is huge. It's something like 14. I mean, it's a massive, massive difference in time on, either side of the day. Whereas in the Indian subcontinent, where Ayurveda is from, it's only a couple hours difference.
Yeah.
So when we're leaning into that season, whether it's summer solstice or winter solstice, we see that, okay, now the day's really shrunk, for example. So maybe the energetics as they flow throughout the day are a bit contracted as well. Maybe there's
Mm.
more of some time and less of another. So maybe there's more kapha chill rest time and less of the energetic, active doing time versus the summer solstice where you've got way more time, which doesn't mean like go nuts all night. But if you've got sunlight till 10 p.m. and you've had your dinner, you could go back out and do some really like not aggressive, angry, like get your stress out weeding, but you could go out and do some gentle sunset gardening, which is grounding, but also taking advantage of the extended light. So things can
Hmm.
adjust a bit more as we see that ebb and that flow and that stretch and that contraction across the 8 seasons.
Hmm. I really noticed this being Canada the most recent time. We just got back, and I think this works so beautifully with herbalism specifically, which of
Mm,
course was always, they were always, uh, you know, interwoven together. But we last year when we went in like June,
mm,
and this time we went in August. And to see the difference, I missed so many plants in their peak, and I was partly sad, but also it was fascinating. So most of the echinacea was done. A lot of the wild roses were, already forming rose hips.
mm,
Um, there was so much difference, and then the goldenrod was at its peak. There was no mullein anywhere to be seen, but the goldenrod was like just peak harvesting time. And so you really do get to see it. If you're paying attention, you get that nuance that you just don't
mm,
get with the four seasons. And again, it probably is, it's very empowering to be able to understand the landscape around you and know how to work with it to,
mm,
yeah, better your health and better, better your communities as well, empower your
mm,
communities and the people around you. I'd
mm.
love to know how working with the seasons in this way, the 8 season model, has influenced your personal life and your herbal work specifically. What ways do you kind of bring it into your home?
Personal life is a lot more excuse for crafting. I'm currently working on a series of 8 tapestries. Sounds quite grand, but let's call them tapestries because they're a labor of love.
Okay.
Basically, a big piece of felt with lots of needle felting and felt appliques, and then crewel work, which is like embroidery but with wool, which is what my grandma did. This to
Wow.
people who are listening, there's an amazing piece of crewel work behind me in my office, and my grandma did that in
Wow.
1972. So I've been doing one of those for each of the seasons. I just finished the first harvest one 2 days late. I was like, finish it, like embroidering all these little wheat sheaves, I finished it. So now I'm starting on the autumn equinox one, and hopefully I can finish that before the season finishes. But if not, it'll be ready for next year. Um, so more excuse for crafting and a bit more of changing the seasonal decor, which my mom always did, but in a quite,
Hmm.
kind of like Hallmark seasons type of way. And I knew that I love that, but I wanted to do it a little differently. So now it's a lot more of the 8 seasons in terms of that. And then from a herbalism perspective, um, well, herbalism crossover with life because herbalism is life. Um,
Truth.
yeah, it's given a lot of opportunity to, as I mentioned, look at the rhythm and the flow of our daily lives as a family. What's sticking? What's causing tension? What's not working? What are opportunities to shift and adjust things? Which herbs are we going to incorporate more into our cooking now? When do we need to focus on harvesting? Paying, I mean, do this anyway, but it's given another level to paying attention to which herbs are in season, which ones are we working with seasonally for health, but with incorporating into things like cooking, the original kind of baseline herbalism, the core, um, and then making remedies or priming for the next season. So it's actually created a lot of satisfaction in my life. Like, I always know where I am, which my husband jokes because map wise, I'm not usually paying attention to where, like, I know where I am. I am here. And then I'm going to there. He's like, you have no idea where you are. but nature rhythm wise, I always know where I am, which is really comforting. So the season changes to that next season on the wheel of the year. And then the meals that are on rotation change, and the herbs that are going into the cooking change, and the herbs that we're drinking as tea change, and the timings of life change. Like I mentioned, is dinner earlier or later? Things like for the school run, it's kind of before some of our guts are really ready to eat, especially when it's darker in the morning. So have a little bit of something if you want before you leave for the school run. Pack a hot thermos of scrambled eggs or whatever. Somebody has that in the car. If I'm doing the school run, I usually have it after I've settled into the parent lounge when my digestion's woken up. So finding those opportunities to weave things in, rather than just like, oh, I've got to go here, there, and everywhere, and I'm hungry. And I either stay hungry or buy something that's expensive and I don't really want, that doesn't make me feel great. And then it just creates all of this dysregulation. Or you can just lean into that seasonal flow and everything just calms down and gets happy.
Let's make this people's permission to lean into the seasonal flow and live life differently throughout the year. I think a lot of us feel like, again, like the society where it stands really favors consistency and repetition and fitting a box rather than being able to be a shape of your own. And so it's okay, and actually it's better for you, for your health, for your family's health, for your family's like mental well-being too, to take the pressure off, because we are cyclic beings, and we aren't meant to be the same all the time. So this is your permission slip to not be the same all the time and to live with the seasons, because it really does make life just better all the way around. So what are some other ways that specifically working with the wheel of the year might enhance a herbal practice? So for these people who maybe are already working with herbs, other than like incorporating them in cooking and maybe a supplement, how else can working with the seasons in this way kind of build on that herbal practice?
Well, if you're really syncing with the seasons from a herbal perspective, especially if you are growing or foraging responsibly, you're really paying attention to when the plants are at their peak. And you're dedicating the time to, she says, knowing full well that this summer, did I get to do any harvesting? No, because I was 24/7 parenting hardcore. And that's okay. That is a season in the cycle of life as well, right? I probably could have taken her into the herb garden and harvested loads. But then by the time you get to process all of it, we're done, right? And then it's going to go to waste. So paying attention to when things are at their peak so you can really appreciate what peak looks and feels like. And then processing your herbs, whether it's drying them or making them into tinctures, when they're at their peak, so you capture that, and then you're slowly sort of building and cycling things. I think as well, paying attention to, with herbal medicine, because we can preserve our herbs in alcohol and things like that, you can technically work with whatever herb you want all year round, just like if you go
Mm-hmm.
to the grocery store and you can get strawberries and tomatoes all year round, which is not seasonally appropriate. So, we think about kind of food meters rather than food miles. Think about that maybe with your herbs as well. Which are the herbs that are around you that are peak at that time? Those are the ones that want to be worked with then, if you're working seasonally. Obviously, if you've got something specific and long term, then work with your tinctures and a herb that's maybe not in season, but work with that throughout your journey of getting back into balance with that. But outside of that, we don't your body isn't necessarily attuned to or wanting a herb that's at its peak at a completely opposite time of the year, or that comes with the energetics of a different season, because it's not of that moment, so I
Mm-hmm.
think we've got ways that we can align our working with herbs so that they do become more seasonal in that way, outside of the things that you preserve for specific long-term support or something acute, like your classic yarrow, peppermint, and elderflower tea for fevers. Yeah. Fever doesn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily limit itself to when those three plants are at their peak. So, preserve that and work with that when you need it. But that's a kind of specific acute example rather
Yeah.
than you wouldn't be drinking that all season.
Mm-hmm.
Versus cleavers, which is very cooling. So I always say anybody who, once the cleavers are properly out, you can work with them, and cold infusion is great. But make sure you've got, if it's still actually cold where you are, put some fresh ginger in as well, because otherwise it's too cold. Cleavers doesn't preserve particularly well. It doesn't really want to be worked with outside of that spring flushing through time. It's not one to
Mm-hmm.
use in winter unless you're specifically working on clearing lots of lumps and bumps that have been there for a long time in the lymphatic system.
Yeah. And I think I recently did a workshop on Vancouver Island with some lovely ladies that I met at a herb gathering last year, and it was none of it was it was something that I think was probably really geared more towards beginners, and
Mm,
so in that sense there was a lot of information I already knew, but to see the potency of her medicine, it's
mm,
wild. We made a salve, or like a balm, and the color is truly unlike anything I've ever seen. And the practices she was using, like the methods she was using, were actually, they had less steps. They were more geared towards the folk methods than anything else.
mm,
But the results were incredible. And her whole thing was it's growing your own herbs, because they lose potency the longer they're dried, or basically out of the ground. And
mm,
so she either makes things with fresh plant, or she dries it and immediately turns it into medicine. And
mm,
the only herbs, she doesn't sell teas, because the only herbs that she dries are just for her own personal tea stash, because
mm.
basically, the longer they're around, the more medicine that they lose. And so
Yeah.
getting to actually see the results of, medicine that has been harvested at peak of its season, like right when it's meant to be picked, which for some of them, obviously for like calendula, you kind of want the flower, to be sort of developed. But then for a lot of things like goldenrod, when they're just budding, is really great too. So it depends on the plant and when its
Mm,
peak point is. But to be able to harvest at the right times, it really makes a huge difference. And that was
mm-hmm,
so clear. So I
mm-hmm,
thank you for sharing that, because it definitely, I think that's the greatest benefit that working with the 8 seasons can offer, like an actual, if you're a manufacturer or you're wanting to make, herbal medicine for your home to use
mm-hmm,
throughout the seasons, and that being able to harvest and actually make it right when it's fresh and ready and wanting
mm-hmm.
to be worked with is just a game changer. So today we're also talking about the Ayurvedic Doshas. And Ayurveda is one of the oldest healing systems on earth, along with
Mm,
traditional Chinese medicine. And I don't know a huge amount about Ayurveda. I have a working knowledge, but it's definitely not something I am an expert in. But so in this way, I'd love you to give us a bit of an introduction into the three doshas for people who are
Mm.
completely new to it, and kind of what they are, how they work with seasonal stuff. Yeah.
Sure. So, the one of the kind of core concepts in Ayurveda is the doshas. So that is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and those are combinations of elements. So Vata is air and ether, or some people call it spirit. Think I heard it through the ether, or on the other side of the veil, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of ether around at Samhain. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Pitta is mostly fire with a bit of water, but think of water more kind of like oil than wet water, which gets even hotter when there's fire around. And then Kapha, which is water and earth. So these are the elements in nature and combinations of these elements that give us the dynamics of nature, ourselves included. So, as individuals, we've got all three of these doshas within us, but one or two might be more prominent than the others. So, for example, personally, I'm very high pitta. So, fire, 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 right? I'm a Leo, which aligns with that as well. Um, so pittas are very, perfectionists and very driven and visionary and lots of energy. And they're, sometimes they're people who like to do a lot of physical activity, and they've got that really intense, fiery, passionate energy. Vatas, you've got air and ether. So think like you're very creative, inspired artist type, yeah, who gets the inspiration and then translates it into something really creative. But like the air, it's kind of always moving. So maybe a bit harder to pin them down. They might forget to like eat. They could, more of the extreme could be a bit away with the fairies kind of description. And then you've got Kapha, earth and water. So think of that like clay, solid, structural, steady, reliable, can also be stubborn, So Kapha, in its really positive manifestation, the sort of stereotypical image is like the earth mother, right? Like, loves, these are the people who love feeding have more. These are the people who are like, bring everybody's children around so I can cuddle them. These are also the farmers, yeah, like it's chucking it down, it's freezing out, and they've like hardly noticed because, well, this is what you do. You get up at 4 a.m. and you do what you have to do, and then you just crack on the next day, have your tea and carry on. But that can also manifest as quite stubborn, quite stuck in their ways, kind of couch potato mode. So that's what it kind of looks like in people. But that cycles in the seasons as well. It also cycles at different times of the day, but we won't go down that rabbit hole today. That's a whole other thing. So cycles through the seasons as well. So you've got pitta usually. So pitta is the heat starting to build and accumulate in the spring, because we see that kind of the energy bursting forth with the new plants. And then when it gets to summer, overflows, and then we feel the heat. Nature wise, climate wise, weather wise, but also within us, we might be feeling a bit more hot and bother, a bit more prickly heat, that kind of thing. Then, later in the summer, Vata starts accumulating. The wind starts coming in a bit more and overflows in autumn when it's really breezy and it starts getting colder. That cycles through, and then Kapha gradually starts accumulating. End of autumn really bulks up in winter, and then when we're all wintering and cozy and inside, and then like the snow melting overflows in spring, and that's where I think water and earth, phlegm, yeah, so that's where like all the phlegm that's been protecting the body and catching the microbes over the winter starts melting and coming out the nose and coughing up and all of that. So those are the three doshas, and their kind of general cycle through us, manifestation in us, and cycle through the seasons. And there are, of course, like way, way more nuance. I mean, Ayurveda is 2,000 years old. So
Mm-hmm.
there's plenty to learn in there. But actually, that core concept of the doshas and you can apply that to just about anything. What type of fever somebody has, what type of eczema somebody has, what type of digestion somebody has, how it's behaving, how somebody's got any imbalance in their daily life or in their body. Vata, Pitta, and Kapha type. You can apply that to everything, and that will actually get you quite a long way in terms of then starting to understand what you need to balance with to bring things into an equilibrium, which herbs to pull in. So that's why we weave it through all 3 years of our course in the teaching. We look at everything from what's Vata Pitta Kapha version of this, because it gives us
Mm-hmm.
that tailoring so that you're not just going, oh, okay, somebody's got X. So this blog says these 5 herbs, you give them for that. Well,
Yeah.
we don't know. Is it Vata Pitta or Kapha type of X? That's going to determine which
Yeah.
herbs.
And so you could kind of say that the doshas are kind of a bit like an energetic archetypal blueprint, or, an
Yeah.
energy, an archetype that we can work with.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for explaining that. Hopefully
Yeah.
everybody understands. And so, how can working seasonally with the doshas support well-being? You kind of touched on, understanding the elements and the way that they're affecting the human body and the environment, even as we proceed through the seasons. What are some other ways that can be really supportive for health and well-being?
So in each season, sort of seasonal chunk, you've got the bit when that dosha is starting to accumulate. Imagine you've got a cauldron, or rather, picture your own cauldron. AKA, stock pot. But so you've got this cauldron, and as the seasons, progress, the cauldron is filling with a particular dosha. So filling with Vata or Pitta or Kapha, depending on the year. And that's fine because the energies are changing throughout the year. But we want to make sure that stuff goes in and then stuff regularly and gently goes out. Because if that pot fills up and then the change of the season comes and we're in the peak of that season, it's going to overflow. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
overflow in our bodies is what manifests as illness or imbalance. So overflow of kapha is all the snot and the mucus and the phlegm coming out. Overflow of vata is those dry coughs and colds, or the dry itchy skin, or the like getting really dysregulated nervous system and just really frazzled because everything's kind of a bit like here, there, and everywhere. Overflow of pitta in the body is things like fevers, or things like prickly heat or red rashes or feeling really irritated. So they have different ways of manifesting in the body. And if we are paying attention to the seasons and the doshas, the cauldron is filling, I'm making sure that I'm emptying it. The cauldron is filling, I'm making sure that I'm emptying it based on what you're doing day in, day out during that season, which herbs you're working with, what food you're eating, and of course, which herbs you're putting on it. Then, when you come into the next season, you've not got that overflow. Because guess what? Seasons change, and the next cauldron is going to start filling up as well. Yeah. Which means, for example, say you've had one of those really phlegmy, chesty colds in winter, kapha time, and you kind of suppressed it, and just, I've just got to crack on, I'll just take some pharmaceutical decongestants, yeah, I'm fine. That's all still in your body wanting to process. So if you've not emptied that cauldron, if you just suppressed it, you put a lid on a really full pot that's, for example, on high heat, it's going to start boiling and splattering everywhere. And I don't know, if it were really dramatic, maybe it would blow the top off. I mean, probably not with physics, but imagine it does. Yeah. And for the spirit of analogy. So eventually that will happen, and that pot might simmer It might simmer and wait till the next season, or it might simmer if you've not dealt with it and simmer, simmer, simmer all year long. And then when kapha season comes back around again, you have got really into just like, whoa, and you are stuck on the couch and you are forced to deal with it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are able to deal with it each season, we're not carrying forward from the next one, because that's dis-ease, imbalance, that's still sitting in the body, and that's just going to fester and build up more toxins and create more imbalance and ultimately lead to more illness. So you don't want something to start off as a mild thing that you could have, brought back into balance and supported yourself and taken care of, and let that just hang about and not address it for years and years and years and years. And then there's a
Mm-hmm.
really serious imbalance in the body and something that's a lot harder to walk the path back from.
Yeah, in naturopathic medicine, we, basically work on the principle that if, that it's going to find a way to come out. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're forcing something down, whether it's an emotion, whether it's taking, a symptomatic treatment over and over for an illness, your body will express it somehow. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. So you can only
Mm-hmm.
force it in for so long, and eventually it's going to come out. So that makes perfect sense to work with the doshas in that way, and make sure that we're emptying our cauldron, love the analogy,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, so that we're not creating that festering, creating that congestion, which we know results in lymphatic issues, and can just manifest in some really serious ways if we're not dealing
Mm-hmm.
with this regularly. And so let's talk about your system. So you work with the 8 seasons, Sabbats
Mm-hmm.
seasons, 8 seasons through the year, and also the 3 doshas.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've kind of touched on this, but they do come together and intersect with each other. Could you, I guess, speak into that a little bit more, and maybe talk about your 8 season formula for enhanced connection vitality?
Yes. So again, this will sort of flex and stretch and rotate a bit based on where you are. So what you might do, I mean, I've done a diagram for my students, but it's very UK based. So if you think to sort of classic school crafts of, those kind of push pins that have those two prongs that split out, so then you can create a little rotating,
Mm-hmm.
moving thingy. So if you have your 8 seasons, yeah, and then you have what for one circle, and then you make a bigger circle, that's the 3 doshas as they cycle. Then you put that special little, I can't remember what they're called, that little rotatey push pin thing in the middle of
I know
it.
what you mean.
Yeah, then you can adjust it based on where you are. And it might even be on the year. Things might shift, things might become a bit earlier, things might happen a bit later, depending on what the heck is going on with the climate at any given point. um,
Mm-hmm.
so the formula really is tune into each of the 8 seasons and flow with it as much as you can while you're in it, and keep in your mind, I am preparing for what's coming next. Yeah. Which is a wise thing to do for any stage of life. Like, for example, if you're pregnant, okay, you're like reading all of the books. Yeah. Preparing for what comes next, which is not just labor, it's also, postpartum. It's all, you're pregnant and you're going, okay, I'm learning how to breastfeed now because I'm going to need to know that once I've had the baby. So, preparing for what comes next. You're in the season, and pay attention to your body. Ooh, for example, summer. Got lots of prickly heat. I'm feeling really irritated. I'm getting really bloated a lot. It's just all this heat's kind of getting stuck in my body. Okay. Bring the heat down now. Bring in the cool. But we also need to look at, so decreasing the excess pitta, emptying that pitta cauldron. Yeah. Plus, the vata pot has already been put on the stove and is starting to get filled up. So how can we make sure that that's not starting to overflow as well? So we bring in the cool, decrease the pitta. The balance to Vata is Kapha. It's the opposite. The opposite of away with the fairies is like standing steadfast in my field of sheep. Yeah. So make sure you've got the nourishment in. Make sure you've got the grounding in. Maybe slow the pace a bit. Maybe get a little bit more rhythm and regularity in, because sometimes summer can be like there's, less of a schedule, or we're traveling, you're here, there, and everywhere. Okay, so how can we bring a rhythm into all this spaciousness, this like arms stretched out to the sky and like, yes, soak in all the Vitti, yeah? Bring in a rhythm even within that spaciousness, because that will help to keep you grounded, so that Vata's not going, I'm traveling here, then I'm going there, and oh, we all forgot to eat, and I guess we'll just have lots of ice cream, and yeah, this all about Vata deranging. Yeah, it's going to throw you off. So bring a rhythm into that expanse, and have it bring in some cool as well, because you don't want too much heat bothering you then and then carrying forward into the next season, and you don't want that Vata cauldron filling so that you've got 2 pots to deal with in the next season. So something like that is how I would say.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, balance in the now, prepare for the next. Balance in the now, prepare for the next. Which you can make, as I say to my students, and I am the queen of making things complicated if I want to, right? You can make things as complicated as you want. Yeah. How long is a piece of string? But even if you pare it back to its simplest form of, I am in this present 1/8, of the year. I am in this season. I am in this moment. Turn up the volume on your intuition. What does my body want right now in terms of food? When do I feel like eating? When do I feel like getting up in the morning when I feel good? When do I feel like going to sleep? And I totally appreciate that for many people, that concept is like, well, that's a total luxury because the school run is at this time and I've got these evening obligations, what have you. But that's an invitation to look at what you're up to. Are some of those things, for even if it's that slice of the wheel, are some of those things really what you need to do? Do you really need to do it? And if you don't have to do it, do you really want to do it? Because it might be this time of year, we don't really do that thing. That, in winter, everybody's in bed by 8 because it's dark out and we ate early and we're resting up. Fine. There's no social obligation as an adult that you're not a grown-up unless you go to bed after 10 o'clock, right? If you're tired, go to bed. You don't need to watch that rubbish on the TV because it's probably rubbish anyway, or say, it's evening and, I mean, let's be honest, all year round is embroidery season for me, but peak embroidery season is when the nights get longer for me. Do you really want to watch that, sit around wasting an hour in the evening exposing yourself to, blue light for something you really don't want to watch? Or do you want to play a card game, with your family, like a chill one? Don't get super crazy, revved up about it because that's not going to help you with sleep. You want to play a card game? Do you want to do some coloring? Do you want to do some crafts? Do you want to, just like sometimes that time of year, we just put the fireplace on and just sit in the lounge with the fireplace on, and we've got a couple lamps that have got really kind of low, like orangey, very low grade, bulbs in them. And we'll just sit and chill and have a cup of tea or a cup of warm milk or something like that and just stare at the fire. You don't have to be looking at a screen all the time. Haha, be radical, put your phone away. But that's, like I said, the formula can be as complicated or as simple as you want to be. But the essence of it, because we are nature, is first of all remembering that you are nature and that nature's wisdom speaks really loudly if you just turn up the volume on it. And what that is called in our bodies is our intuition. So when your gut says, this is too late to be going to bed, this is too early to be eating. You
Mm-hmm.
know, when your gut says, is this really doesn't feel right eating this particular dish this time of year, when your gut says, do you know, I've had my chamomile tea season and now I think I need more of the, you know, cinnamon or the licorice or something like that. Listening to that, because your body, all it wants to do is tell you how it needs help,
Mm-hmm.
how you can align more with everything else that's, you know, outside your window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love. There's two parts that I want to touch on, and in a bit, like, have a little thought on. One
Mm.
of them is my mum was listening to a podcast the other day, and she was like mind blown. She's like, "I've got to tell you this thing. It was just radical, and it changed my life." And I went, "Okay, bring it on. What is it that has changed your life?" And she said, "Oh, the guy was talking about how every yes is a no," and
Mm.
I was like, okay, I'm following you. And she was like, because if you say yes to something, it means that's a no to something else that you could be doing at that same time. Um, and that's part of what I love about paganism. Not that this is about spirituality. We're
Mm.
removing that from this a little bit, but is the personal responsibility aspect. Like, we all have a
Mm-hmm.
choice. What do they say?
Mm-hmm.
We've all got the same hours in the day as Beyonce. Now, to be fair, Beyonce probably has a lot of help, but it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of true. Like, we all have the same amount of hours in a day. And so if some of us can manage it, it's because we're saying no to some things to say yes to other things that we're prioritizing. And so it really does come down to how badly do you want it for yourself. And then the second part to that is I also listened to a podcast myself about intuition one day. And that was so interesting to me because they were talking about, and it was a spiritual podcast, but they were talking about how
Mm.
intuition, for those of people out there that are a little skeptical, is actually not all just spirit based. It actually
Mm.
is really tapping into your subconscious, really, and your subconscious is paying attention to all these things that maybe consciously we're not aware of at this
Mm.
point in time. But it's paying attention to the seasons. It's paying attention to how our bodies are feeling in the moment. It's paying attention to things other people have told us. It's paying attention to all this stuff all the time to keep us
Mm.
safe and to keep us well. And so tapping into our intuition really is just learning to tap into our own subconscious. And it's all stuff we already know. So I like, you talk about turning up the dial on intuition. And it really is, it's there. Everyone has it because we all
Mm-hmm.
have a subconscious, and that is a fact. And so being
Mm.
able to just tune in with that deeper level of ourselves to enhance our well-being,
Mm-hmm.
and then being able to take that responsibility and make those choices to create space so that we can have some of these practices in our life, because ultimately nobody can do it for you but yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
And herbalism is
that
so
too.
much about personal responsibility. You're not going to
Mm-hmm.
somebody else to tell you what, I mean, you know, if you've got a really complex something and you need, you know, support of somebody who's really obviously skilled and experienced. But herbalism is not about go to somebody and they will tell you, take this pill, and now you've been a good girl because you've taken this thing and you've not had to change anything about how you're living your life. No, that's
Mm-hmm.
not herbalism. Herbalism is all about the personal responsibility. And, you know, with turning up the volume on your intuition, the louder our intuition is, the more it drowns out all the rest of the noise from, you know, social standards, which are mostly not helping people, to marketing, to whatever. What's the difference between us and a tree? A tree doesn't hear the marketing. So the tree just cracks on with its healing and its breathing and, you know, its reproduction, and it's, you know, providing homes for all kinds of, you know, creatures and doing what it needs to do. And it doesn't go, oh, my mother tree never should have planted me here, it's all her fault, you know, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe if I use this cream then I'll be a prettier tree and more birds will want to nest in me. It just like cracks on with it, right? So like, be more tree, get rid of
Yeah.
all that crap.
Absolutely. I think, the marketing thing is such a big piece of health these days because people are so confused. People are
Mm.
so confused. And that really is what's doing it. It's marketing because everybody's selling something now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also that we are programmed, and, I'm going to say generally through no fault of our own, but we're programmed from a very young age
Mm-hmm.
to kind of hand our responsibility away, hand our
Mm-hmm.
empowerment away, hand the power to other people. And unfortunately, there's even a lot of people in the health profession, a lot of people who, especially now with Instagram algorithms and, becoming influencers, they are maybe perhaps sometimes thinking they're doing good work, but actually they're just really happy to take that power for you.
Mm.
And so learning to tune that out and take our power back so we can be responsible for our own health.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely, it's going to help that confusion if you can kind of tune that stuff out, because
Mm-hmm.
really, I mean, there's some good information online. You and I obviously post things online as well.
Mm.
And I like to think we're pretty sane individuals, and we're coming to it from a good place. But ultimately, everybody needs to check in with themselves first to make sure that something feels right for them. And we all have that ability. It's just how much work we're putting into reconnecting in that way.